They got to get the hell out of Dodge. Now, I'm telling you right now, I believe more than half of this team is going to leave. I believe a few big names is probably going to leave.
The final buzzer signaling the Indiana Fever's elimination in the playoffs had barely finished sounding when the silence in the locker room was shattered by a chain reaction of corporate detonations. This was not the typical quiet of a season ended. This was the precursor to a violent, necessary organizational surgery.
No one predicted them to go this far, especially without Caitlin Clark.
That's what she preached to me in the recruiting process. You know, you're going to have the ball in your hands a lot.
Now, y'all heard that, right? Now, we all know Stephanie White was running a whole lot of sets, bro.
Hours after their playoff run came to a halt, the Fever front office executed a move that stunned the WNBA landscape. The immediate release of 8 players in a single, ruthless sweep. Fans, analysts, and rivals were caught entirely off guard, scrambling to comprehend the scale of the destruction. This was not a minor roster shuffle. It was an unprecedented level of roster overhaul for a franchise centered around the league's most valuable asset. The questions immediately surfaced. What drives a major organization to clean house with such terrifying speed? Was this a panicked, desperate reaction to underachievement? Or the cold, calculated execution of a master plan that had been developing for months behind closed doors? The scale of the cuts immediately signaled that the issues plaguing the Fever were organizational and systemic, running far deeper than circumstantial injury luck or poor fourth-quarter execution. Management had seized the moment of failure to deliver a harsh, defining message to the league, and more importantly, to their own coaching staff. The old way of doing business was over. The purge of these 8 careers was the visible outcome of a long-simmering internal conflict, revealing that the franchise was willing to obliterate its past to secure its future. Everything in Indiana from that moment forward would revolve around maximizing the star power of Caitlin Clark. The number 8 represents more than just a head count. It signifies a complete cultural cleansing within the Fever organization. When the news of the mass exodus broke, the strategy behind the cold dismissal of these specific individuals became terrifyingly clear. Management was not interested in marginal improvements. They were systematically removing every player who represented friction, financial inefficiency, or allegiance to the restrictive system that had stifled their superstar. The cuts targeted specific archetypes whose continued presence conflicted directly with the new mandate. Easily the biggest name casualty was Natasha Howard, the high-cost anchor. Despite her championship experience, sources suggested her high salary demands and her tendency to operate outside of the intended fast-paced system sealed her fate. Cutting Howard was the first critical financial domino, signaling that the franchise was done committing large chunks of their budget to players who did not perfectly enhance the dual core of Clark and Aaliyah Boston. Financial efficiency, particularly given the looming new collective bargaining agreement (CBA) that promises soaring salaries, became paramount. Beyond the financials, the purge eliminated locker room resistance. Veterans such as Sydney Colson, who provided leadership but were fundamentally aligned with the old, structured WNBA approach, were deemed expendable. Their removal eliminates potential dissenting voices that might resist the rapid cultural change necessary for the Clark-centric revolution. The front office's clear priority for the upcoming 2026 season was stability around Kelsey Mitchell, Boston, and Clark. Therefore, any player whose style or salary structure conflicts with maximizing the untouchable core became an immediate casualty. Other departures like Lexi Hull and Aerial Powers represented wasted potential or inconsistent production. While Hull was known as a solid defensive presence, her production did not justify her roster spot or salary, proving that management was done waiting for development. The front office needed immediate high IQ floor spacers, not players who required patience. This was a brutal statement. Indiana was no longer a place for slow development or misalignment. This was not merely a performance review, it was a cultural execution designed to eliminate any trace of the old way of thinking. The rules of engagement in Indiana had fundamentally changed, centered entirely on the needs of the superstar, and the casualties listed below were the first price paid for that transformation. But if the cuts were perceived to be solely about saving cash or shuffling names, the true scale of the internal conflict was missed. The real war was being fought over the system itself, a power struggle between a restrictive philosophy and the singular genius it was desperately trying to suffocate. The strategic failure that directly triggered the roster purge was the irreconcilable conflict between the Fever's coaching philosophy and Caitlin Clark's innate transcendent game. At Iowa, Clark thrived in a read-and-react offense under Coach Bluter, a dynamic, constantly evolving system that prioritized instinct, freedom, and flow, positioning Clark as the conductor of the entire floor. This fluid system unlocked her ability to deliver logo threes, create breathtaking passes, and command the tempo of the game. However, in the WNBA, the Fever's offense under head coach Stephanie White rapidly drifted into a restrictive, rigid structure defined by forced sets, slow ball movement, and predictable plays. While Clark managed to adjust and deliver, the fundamental misalignment was visible to anyone watching. The paradox of her dominance became the biggest indictment of the coaching system. Despite the structural constraints, Clark was scoring or assisting on a staggering 44% of the Indiana Fever's entire offense. This contribution level, while sensational on paper, represents an inefficient, exhausting burden. She was consistently forced to create under duress, operating within a restrictive system that required immense physical and mental strain to compensate for poor flow and suboptimal lineups. This strategic failure meant the coaching system was actively jeopardizing the franchise's most valuable investment. The issue was not that Clark was performing poorly, it was that she was carrying an unsustainable load because the system failed to amplify her strengths. This over-reliance leads to player exhaustion, increased potential for injury, and most critically risks alienating the economic engine of the WNBA. The front office could not tolerate this organizational risk. The failure was deeper than simply losing games, it was risking the entire Caitlin Clark effect by forcing her into a predictable box that neutered her primary talent, reading the defense and improvising at high speed. The mass purge, therefore, became a mandated strategic realignment, designed to eliminate the systems and the players associated with those systems that were actively conflicting with the financial and competitive success generated by their superstar. The message was unmistakable. The system had to change, or the personnel running it would be eliminated. The 8 roster cuts were merely the external manifestation of a quiet, intense power struggle that defined the Fever's season. The front office versus head coach Stephanie White. Behind the scenes, tension had been simmering for months. The front office advocated fiercely for an open, Clark-centric offense, the Iowa blueprint transplanted to the WNBA. White, however, defended her more rigid, structured approach, reportedly arguing that the existing team composition was not ready for that level of freedom. Viral video headlines hinted at shocking decisions and growing controversy and clashing voices inside the locker room, positioning White firmly under the organizational microscope. The playoff elimination provided management with the final, unequivocal evidence they needed. It was not just a loss. Management viewed the defeat as absolute proof that White's structured style could not deliver when facing championship-caliber competition. Her offense was frequently criticized as being painfully predictable, characterized by endless pick-and-rolls that forced Clark into tight boundaries instead of allowing improvisation. The mass release of 8 players acted as a nonverbal ultimatum delivered directly to the coach. Firing a head coach is often costly and disruptive, particularly a respected figure like White, who was hired to revamp the staff. However, firing her staunch veteran supporters and players who thrived in the rigid system achieved the same strategic goal, but more subtly. By clearing the roster of the old guard, the front office guaranteed that the remaining core and all incoming free agents would be players naturally aligned with the fast-paced read-and-react vision. This tactic completely undermined the coach's resistance and leverage over the team's culture. This was a calculated move to isolate White. The front office was declaring, "We are committed to Clark's style. You must adapt, or you will find yourself coaching a roster specifically engineered to reject your current philosophy." This strategic maneuver dramatically ratcheted up the tension, placing White in an incredibly precarious position, regardless of her previous accomplishments or the difficult hands she may have been dealt. The purge was management weaponizing the roster to enforce a strategic decision, ensuring the coach's future hinged entirely on her willingness to abandon her foundational principles. While the dramatic focus was on system alignment and coaching authority, the financial genius behind the purge reveals the true long-term ambition of the Fever organization. The front office did not just clear personnel, they cleared serious salary space, transforming the franchise's financial outlook for the crucial 2026 season. By releasing 8 contracts simultaneously, the Fever freed up millions in cap room, boosting their projected cap space to over $1.3 million, a significant figure in the WNBA. This was a move rooted in profound economic strategy, not just athletic preference. The Caitlin Clark effect has already transformed the Fever into a profitable premium product, driving unprecedented spikes in ticket sales, merchandise, and national media visibility. To capitalize on this economic engine, the team must win immediately. Winning requires system alignment and, crucially, financial flexibility. The mass cuts delivered both. Veterans like Natasha Howard and others were deemed poor returns on investment relative to their salary cap hit. Cutting them freed capital necessary to chase higher impact, lower cost specialized talent, high IQ shooters, floor spacers, and defensive wings who fit the specific requirements of the read and react system. The timing of this financial reset is critical because of the looming new CBA. Anticipation of vastly increased players' salaries in the 2026 season meant that having maximum cap space now allows the Fever to enter free agency with the strongest possible negotiating position, targeting key role players before contracts balloon further. The strategy is simple. Surround Clark and Boston with high IQ, low-cost talent who buy into a modern offensive system without demanding max contracts. The Fever are building an Iowa on steroids, but built deliberately within a tight budget that grants them long-term control. This blend of shrewd financial discipline and strategic athletic construction is the new competitive edge, setting them apart from franchises that might chase expensive short-term super teams. The cuts were not simply about player performance, they were about cutting costs and cutting excuses simultaneously, ensuring that everything in Indiana runs through two parallel forces, Caitlin Clark and the bottom line. The mass purge served to crystallize the absolute core identity of the franchise. With the old guard eliminated, the dynamic within the Fever locker room is now unmistakably centered around three untouchable figures: Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and Kelsey Mitchell. Every future strategic move is designed to enhance this triumvirate. Clark remains the transcendent star, the cultural icon, and the spark that ignites the offense. Boston, the reigning Rookie of the Year before Clark, stands as the quiet enforcer, the consistent force of dominance in the paint, providing the bedrock stability the team needs. Management views them as the dual faces of Indiana's future, where Clark provides the tempo and creation, and Boston holds the defense together. The front office made the retention of Kelsey Mitchell their highest priority. Mitchell, a longtime veteran, provided essential seniority and genuine respect. After carrying the franchise through difficult years, her loyalty and tough-mindedness were proven. Crucially, her ability to adapt toward the end of the previous season, sharing the backcourt and finding rhythm alongside Clark, cemented her value. She is seen as the critical anchor, a veteran presence who will mentor younger players and enforce the new cultural alignment in the locker room during this chaotic transition. The mandate for future signings is hyper-specific. Players must be high IQ and capable of anticipating Clark's reads, not just waiting for sets to be called. This demand for seamless fit and mental alignment is prioritized over raw talent alone. The roster purge represents a centralization of power and responsibility onto this small, highly specific core. A small, aligned core minimizes organizational variables, speeding up the cultural reset. By prioritizing Mitchell financially, the front office secures a loyal, talented voice to enforce the new culture. While this strategy accelerates change, it simultaneously compounds the pressure. If any of these three pillars falters due to injury or fatigue, the entire organization risks immediate exposure and catastrophe, given the dramatic nature of the overhaul. This foundation is built for speed, but its stability remains fragile. The dramatic roster cuts now place head coach Stephanie White at the center of the league's most intense coaching crisis. Her situation is no longer a matter of slow adaptation, it is an urgent, career-defining challenge under immense pressure. The front office's actions have established a brutal, low-leverage reality for White. The recent high-profile firing of champion coach Sandy Brondello by the New York Liberty underscores that even significant success no longer guarantees security if the organization's overarching vision changes. White is explicitly on notice. Her structured system, which management views as having suffocated the team's superstar and resulted in a painfully predictable offense, is now an organizational liability. The ultimatum is clear and non-negotiable. The team must transition to a fluid, fast-paced Iowa on steroids system that emphasizes movement, spacing, and trusting Clark's instinct over rigid play calling. The 8 cuts were the final, undeniable proof that management would rather strip the roster bare than compromise on this new strategic direction. If White refuses to fundamentally change her coaching approach and embrace this Clark mandate, the front office has already demonstrated its ruthlessness. Whispers of evaluating alternative coaching candidates are growing louder, ensuring White understands that she will be the next name on the exit list if she fails to align. White's predicament reflects a profound systemic shift in the WNBA power structure. Due to the Caitlin Clark effect, star players now hold unprecedented economic leverage over their organizations. This leverage allows the star's preferred style of play to dictate organizational strategy, even over the head coach's established system. The traditional hierarchy of control has been inverted, with the superstar economic asset now at the apex. White must now manage not only the X's and O's but also the demands of the economic ecosystem surrounding her franchise player. making her situation the defining coaching story of the offseason. The moment the news of the purge hit, the WNBA community exploded. Hashtags trended immediately, and the debate centered on whether the move was one of genius or panic. This reaction was entirely predictable, given Clark's influence, which drives unprecedented visibility and pressure across the league. For Clark's vocal supporters, the purge was ultimate validation, the organizational acceptance of the "let her cook" mandate. Critics, however, accused the organization of caving to star power and hype, arguing that such a mass overhaul signaled a desperate gamble, risking internal stability for the sake of public perception. ESPN panels and analysts debated endlessly whether the Fever were laying the foundation for a dynasty or making a fundamental mistake. The magnifying effect of Clark's presence ensures that every decision made by the Fever, from their coaching structure to their free agent signings, will be analyzed under the national microscope. The margin for error has become non-existent. The organization is betting not only on Clark's talent, but on the perfect, seamless execution of the fast-paced system built around her. If they execute this philosophy flawlessly, they possess the talent and speed to be unstoppable. However, if the chemistry fails, if the young core struggles under pressure, or if Clark faces fatigue or injury, this purge could swiftly become the league's most notorious cautionary tale. Crucially, regardless of next season's results, the purge immediately achieved a strategic goal: instant, sustained relevance and league-wide attention. The Fever, once a struggling small-market franchise, are now dominating headlines, driving record online engagement, and ensuring they are must-watch television. The drama itself is a central part of the commercial product, ensuring massive ratings. The Fever have lost 8 players, but they have gained the full, unyielding attention of the entire basketball world, watching their every move as the great gamble begins. The Indiana Fever's immediate release of 8 players hours after their playoff elimination was not an isolated transaction. It was a revolutionary act of organizational surgery. This action signaled a total cultural reset, aligning the franchise's finance, strategy, and personnel entirely around the Caitlin Clark mandate. Management was ruthless because it was necessary. They had to eliminate friction, secure financial flexibility for the impending CBA, and force strategic alignment to protect and maximize their single greatest economic asset. The internal power struggle with the coaching staff and the immediate cleansing of veterans who represented the old, rigid system have cleared the path for a new identity: fast, fearless, and fluid. The focus is now hyper-centralized on the core partnership of Clark and Boston, supported by a loyal anchor in Kelsey Mitchell and future high IQ specialists. The Fever have declared they are done playing it safe. They have bet everything on a system that unleashes Clark's full potential and restores the fire that can transform them into a perennial contender. The ultimate outcome remains the highest-stake gamble in the WNBA. The pressure is immense, and the consequences of failure are magnified by the global spotlight of the Caitlin Clark effect. But one fact is undeniable: the Fever have captured the imagination of the entire league. They have cleared out the old guard, reshaped their vision, and placed their entire future squarely in the hands of their young superstar. Whether this bold move leads to dynasty or total, catastrophic collapse will be the defining story of the next decade. But the message echoes loudly across the league: the Caitlin Clark era has officially begun.